I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1810 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran.
This episode is brought to you by Legacy Staffs, which are crafted by the Brazos Walking Stick Company in Waco, Texas. You can go to brazosticks.com and use the name Mac Payne, one word, at the checkout and get 10% off your next order of the Legacy Staff or cane of your own design.
Many times on this podcast, I talk about the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. As the name implied, it's made out of a wall of black marble. Upon that wall are etched 58,276 names of Americans who died for their country in Vietnam. Every one of the names on that wall represent a family whose lives were forever changed. You never get over something like that when you lose a loved one in a war. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about one of those people whose name is on the wall and how it affected their family. The veteran I'm going to tell you about who died in Vietnam is Bill Crary. You are invited to go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com. Go to episode 1810, and there you will see a picture of Bill Crary when he graduated from basic training. He came from Fargo, North Dakota. He is still missed to this day by his family. Recently, they wrote a story about Bill and his experiences in Vietnam and how his family was affected by his passing. Fargo man who tried to be conscientious objector to Vietnam War died 50 years ago trying to save a wounded soldier. The story was provided by Mr. Jim Shaw, a writer for the Grand Forks Herald. Grand Forks is north of Fargo, North Dakota, right there on the eastern side of the great state of North Dakota. Fargo, North Dakota is a little south, right on the western banks of the Red River. The Red River is the border between North Dakota and Minnesota. I'm going to share this story with you so that we will remember one soldier who died in Vietnam and the pain that brought to his family. I think it is typical of the Gold Star family's reactions. I'm going to share part of Jim Shaw's story with you about Bill Crary so you can get a better understanding of the heartache caused by that war. Whenever I read stories like this about Bill Mccrary, I keep asking myself, why didn't President Johnson and Robert McNamara listen to Ed Lansdale? Had they done that, more than likely there would not be a black marble wall monument in Washington with all those names on it. Unfortunately, due to the pressures of those times, when we were face to face up against a communist menace, sometimes people are forced to make decisions that have dire consequences. That's what happened here, I believe. Another dire consequence of that war was Agent Orange, but that's a whole different story. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about Bill Mccrary, a fine young man from Fargo, North Dakota. Let's take a look at what Jim Shaw had to say about Bill Mccrary. Dateline, Fargo, North Dakota. There are countless numbers of people who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. They were brave and valiant and answered the call when their country asked them to do so. This is the story of one of them. His name is Bill Crary. He died in the Vietnam War 50 years ago at the age of only 25. Bill grew up in a house at 615 North Street South in Fargo. He was a graduate of Stanley High School and St. Louis University and a student at the University of North Dakota School of Law. He was a happy guy, smiling all the time, said Mara Morberg, Bill's sister. He had an optimistic look on life. Everyone gravitated around Bill. He had this natural thought process about doing the right thing. That's another terrible thing about this story. We need more people around who concentrate on doing the right thing. Continuing. He was a terrific guy, said Sarah Malone, Bill's former girlfriend. He had tremendous depth and was very funny. We connected on a pretty deep spiritual level. He was very honest and had great integrity. This part here, I don't understand. After his first year of law school, Bill was drafted. Pardon me, but I thought if you were in school back in those days, they would not draft you. Unfortunately, we don't know all the circumstances of that situation. Continuing. He had a hard time deciding what to do. Bill was opposed to the Vietnam War. He did not believe in the cause. He strongly thought about going up to Canada. That would have been quite easy for Bill because Fargo is not too far from the Canadian border, and the big city of Winnipeg was just across the border. But he did not take the path of the Yellowtails. Continuing with Jim's story. However, Bill received a lot of pressure from his family to join the Army. They warned him that he would be shunned for life if he did not report. Many members of Bill's family had served in the military, and some told Bill it was his obligation to serve, which was the correct advice. When Bill was drafted, his younger brother Mike was already fighting in the Vietnam War. Unbeknownst to Bill, things had been brutal for Mike in Vietnam. He had been under fire there for 300 days. The most horrific battle came at night as 1,500 North Vietnamese soldiers launched a surprise attack. Mike was the only member of his squad to survive. Mike was never the same after the war, said his sister Mara. He had PTSD, was frightened of loud noises, jumped to the ground when he heard those noises, and became a heavy drinker. Mike died in 2000 at the age of 52. Bill's brother Mike is another one of those names on that black marble wall in Washington, D.C. Continuing. Feeling a sense of obligation and duty, along with love of his country, Bill reluctantly reported to boot camp on June the 18th, 1969. He made clear that he did not want to become a combat soldier. Bill would never pick up a rifle and shoot someone, Morrow said. He would not kill anything. So Bill was trained as a combat medic. He was still conflicted about the war. Pardon me if I may insert something here. Seems to me if you were in law school, you could probably type. If you go to any unit in the Army back in those days and you could type, you would immediately become the company clerk. But again, we don't have all those details. Continuing with Jim's story. I don't like this war. I intend to make the best of this, though. Bill wrote to Sarah from training camp. If I don't discover a better reason for allowing this country to demand of me what I think is so wrong, I should face up to the truth and go to Canada. Bill arrived in Vietnam on May the 3rd, 1970. He was a member of the 196th Light Infantry Brigade, Americal Division, Company D. That is the same division that a contributor to this podcast, Vietnam veteran John Shoemaker, was assigned to. Unfortunately, Jim does not give us the connection from Company D to the 196th Light Infantry Brigade. That's a lot of space in there. If he would have given us more information, we could have determined if maybe he was in John Shoemaker's same battalion, or maybe in the same company, the same regiment, or the same battalion. Continuing with Jim's story. I was frightened for his safety, Sarah said. I feared he would be killed. I knew people who were killed in Vietnam. Bill's best friend in Vietnam was Sergeant Ken Decker. We had a lot of great talks, Decker said. He was smarter than hell. The company's orders were to go on search and destroy missions, to find the enemy and kill them. Most of the time in the field is spent getting from one place to another, setting up camp, taking it down, Bill wrote. Actually, I'm feeling well adjusted since the routine is so stable. There were many horrible obstacles for Bill's company. They included severe heat, heavy rains, crossing creeks, dirty and sweaty uniforms, leeches, mosquitoes, carrying 50 to 75 pounds of equipment, thirst, hunger, lack of sleep, and trying to avoid booby traps. To say that I'm safe would be absurd, Bill wrote. The enemy is very mobile and their booby traps could be anywhere. John Shoemaker attested to that fact. He said booby traps were one of the worst things in that area where the 196th Brigade was operating. Continuing, we feared those booby traps, Decker said. One of our guys stepped on one and was instantly blown up. All we could find was his left foot. Bill also made clear his disdain for the war. Our interference is impractical, inefficient, uninformed, non-directed, non-productive, and inflationary, he wrote. We all realize that we will not win this war or be here for the end of it. That's exactly what Ed Lansdale knew 10 years before, but nobody would listen to him. They all kept talking about dominoes. We don't want the dominoes to fall over in the domino theory, they kept saying. Continuing with Jim's story. Bill's job was to treat the wounded. He also treated heat cramps, stomach cramps, muscle pulls, and diarrhea, supplied and administered drugs, took part in guard duty, and helped the South Vietnamese. Despite his animosity toward the war, Bill was loyal and devoted to those with whom he served. Bill also developed an affinity for the Vietnamese. They are extremely kind to each other, he wrote. Bill Crary shared my admiration for the Vietnamese people. Continuing. Bill took his job very seriously. Everybody liked him, Decker said. He would do anything for his fellow soldiers. I remember watching him bandage a young Vietnamese boy. He had a gentle touch. The longer Bill was in Vietnam, the more disillusioned he became. He was horrified to see the harassment of the villagers. That included shooting them, shooting their animals, torching or blowing up their homes, and beating up old women. For 7 years, we had been beating up on mamasans. That's the term for adult women with children. Burning their homes and killing their livestock, Bill wrote. We have turned into a bunch of marauding Huns terrorizing the people, and we wonder why they don't like us. Keep in mind, Lieutenant Calley was in the Americal Division. Continuing. On May the 27th, 1970, Bill's company was assigned to recover several bodies from another unit. Suddenly and unexpectedly, North Vietnamese troops started firing at them. The point man was shot down in an open area. Bill immediately dropped his backpack and ran toward him, carrying only his medical bag. Bill checked to see if he was breathing and tried to lift him up. At that time, Bill was shot and killed. What Bill did was stupid, but also incredibly brave, Decker said. Besides Bill, 3 other Americans had been shot dead. Because of the intense fire coming from the North Vietnamese, Bill's company had to withdraw. They could not safely return to the scene for 2 days. Decker found Bill's body. He had been shot in the head and chest. The stench at the site was overwhelming. It was heartbreaking to find him, Decker said. We had really connected as buddies. I was pissed off at him, but that was what he was trained to do as a medic. I will never forget what I saw, the sight of those bodies and the smell. On the next Saturday, May the 31st, at about 7 a.m., there was a loud and constant pounding on the door at the Crary family home in Fargo. A uniformed Army officer was at the door and demanded that everyone in the house come downstairs. He told them that Bill was missing in action, saluted, and left. That sounds like sort of an abrupt way to treat a family who just lost someone in Vietnam. Continuing, I was stunned, Bill's sister Mara said. I was in a state of shock. Still, I was hopeful they would find him, or thought he might have been taken prisoner. 3 days later, a telegram came to the house with the worst possible news. Bill was killed in action. I started crying, Mara said. I was a wreck. I knew I also had to find his girlfriend, Sarah. Sarah was studying in Spain and received the news in a phone call from her mother. I was just devastated. I went to my room and collapsed, Sarah said. I would have married him. He was my soulmate. For his bravery and determination, Bill was posthumously awarded a Purple Heart and the Silver Star. Now, 50 years after his death, it is still painful for those who knew and loved him. I think about him all the time, Decker said. The war was a waste. Bill would have made many good things happen in the world. I miss him a lot, Mara said. We were so close. He was someone I could always turn to. Mara keeps a bag of dirt from where Bill was killed on the kitchen counter in her house. I pat that bag every day, Mara said. It gives me comfort. It makes me feel connected to Bill. I wish I had said, go to Canada. It would have saved his life, Sarah said. It is the loss of possibility. I have never gotten over this. The hurt is still there. Bill Crary is buried at the Holy Cross Cemetery in Fargo. His headstone says, Bill Crary, 1945-1970. He died for the country he loved while fighting a war in which he did not believe. That is the end of Jim Shaw's piece about Vietnam veteran Bill Crary. The main point of the story is that when somebody dies in a war like Vietnam, their family will never get over it. That family is still suffering to this day. It is a terrible thing, and as we remember Bill Crary's story, let's hope and pray that the leaders of our nation will learn from this and never repeat again the mistake of going to a war in a place like Vietnam and under those circumstances. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. I hereby issue Bill Crary, unofficial Vietnam Veteran News Podcast salute, and say thank you for your service to your country. Rest in peace. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1810 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often and listen to more of these stories that will be coming your way on this podcast.